Well, what is up, movement? For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sam, and we are going to be in week 2 of our series called Popular. Now, we're going to be talking about today, how do we answer the question, what do we do when we fail? Right? What do we do when we mess up, when we blow it, when we make a major mistake? And I know this is a place where I have been, and most likely all of us have been before. Maybe you feel like you failed a test. Maybe you feel like you failed at a friendship or a relationship, or maybe even your relationship with God. And I've been in those places. So today what we're going to do in order to answer the question, what do we do when we fail? We're going to look at the life of Peter and see what he did when he had one of the most major failures in all of history. But what's cool about Peter's story is he also has one of the greatest, all-time greatest comeback stories ever. So where we pick up in the story of Peter is that he was face to face with Jesus hours before Jesus got captured, taken away, and crucified. And Jesus and him were having a conversation where Peter said, hey, I will always love you. I'm never going to leave you. I'm always going to be your best friend. How many of y'all have a best friend? Type your best friend's name in the comments right now. And it's awesome to have a best friend. And that's what Peter was saying to Jesus. He was like, hey, I'm never going to leave you ever. And Jesus said, actually, here's the way this is going to go down. You're going to tell 3 different groups of people that you don't even know me by the time the sun rises today. That had to be hard for Peter to hear. He kept on denying it, but what happened a few minutes later was Jesus actually got captured, taken away, and eventually would be crucified and resurrect. However, Peter, that night, was around 3 different groups of people, one of which was a little girl who was like, aren't you the guy who knows Jesus? Aren't you the one who was like best friends with him? And he was like, nah, I don't know the guy. Get away from me. 3 different times he said, I have no idea who Jesus is. And that's the worst feeling in the world when you're friends with someone, is for them to deny your existence. How many of y'all, you've been in a room with one of your friends, different group of people walks in, and it's as if they don't know who you are. More popular people come in, and all of a sudden you cease to exist or you cease to be friends. And it's almost like they're embarrassed of you. So Jesus felt that. And it says that when Peter denied him for the 3rd time, that he went away and wept bitterly. He went away and wept bitterly. Because I think he understood the reality that he had messed up. He messed up. Then what happened after that is he goes back to fishing, which was his job before he started hanging out with Jesus. He was a fisherman. How many times in our life do we go back to the thing that hurt us after we failed, right? We fail, we mess up, we make a mistake, we blow it, and then we go back to our self-destructive thinking. We go back to our depressed thoughts. We go back to that habit that we said we were never going to pick up again. We go back to the website we said we were never going to go back to again. Why? Because we failed and we don't know how to handle it. And so Peter kind of lays out a roadmap of how to handle failure, because after he went back to fishing, Jesus showed up on the bank, on the side of the river that Peter was fishing in, and Jesus was waving at him. And that's where we're going to start reading scripture today. Jesus waving to Peter on the side of the riverbank as Peter is fishing. He's with some other disciples, and we're going to pick up in John chapter 21, verses 7 through 9. It says this, then the disciple that Jesus loved said to Peter, there's a nice little pat on the back there, hey, I'm the one who he loves. John said, it's the Lord. When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he jumped into the water and headed to shore. That's a huge key right there. Don't miss that. He jumped out of the boat into the water and headed to shore. The others stayed with the boat and pulled the loaded net to the shore, for they were only about 100 yards away from the shore. When they got there, they found breakfast waiting for them, fish cooking over a charcoal fire, and some bread. In other words, Jesus had made them breakfast. Jesus and Peter made breakfast together. That's pretty cool. And it goes on to say that Jesus and Peter had another conversation where Jesus asked Peter 3 different times, hey, do you love me? And what Jesus was doing when he said that was he was giving Peter the opportunity to make up for the mistakes that he made. And he said, do you love me? And Peter would answer yes. And what Jesus would say was, then feed my sheep. which seems like a weird thing to say when you're like, hey, do you love me? Yes, then feed my sheep. Like if you're just glancing at this, you might think like, does Jesus have a farm that he needs to be like someone to tend? Does he have a flock of sheep and a lot of cattle that he needs to like have somebody look after? But here's what was happening. When Jesus said, feed my sheep, all he meant was, then take care of my people. Take care of my people. Look after my people that I love. Now, I know one thing. I do not ask people that I don't like to take care of people that I love. So Jesus here was stamping his approval of Peter. He was co-signing on the deal, saying, Peter, I know what you did. I told you were going to do it. I knew you were going to mess up, but I still love you, and I still have a plan for your life. So let's pull some things out of this story here. Again, we're on a quest to figure out what do we do when we fail? What do we do when we fail at a relationship, a friendship, a test, something in our academic life? What do we do? Because we're going to mess up. First, what we learn from Peter is that he acknowledged it, right? It says that he went away and wept bitterly. That's him going, hey, I made the mistake. That was my fault. Oftentimes we try to hide it or blame shift, and what that's going to do is that's going to create guilt and shame in our hearts. But what he did, he owned it. He said, you know what? That was my fault. I get it. This one's on me. And then he understood that God already knew. He understood that God already knew the mistakes that he was going to make. Now, this should help us take some of the pressure off. Because when we understand that God already sees our failures, he's already understood what we're going to do wrong, yet he still loves us, still has a plan for our life, and still picks us for his team, all of a sudden we don't have to run in the opposite direction of where Jesus is. We can now run towards Jesus because there is no guilt. There is no shame for the believer because God understands the mistakes we're going to make. Therefore, we can run towards Jesus and not away from Jesus. You see, the reason why Peter jumped out of the boat and went running towards Jesus is because he understood that Jesus was not waiting on the riverbank to say, I can't believe you did that. Peter, I thought we were friends. Let me tell you how disappointed I am in you. And maybe you've heard those words from a coach or a family member or somebody in a moment of weakness. When you failed and they've said, hey, let me tell you how much that hurt me. Let me tell you how much I am disappointed in you. And because of that, you feel the need when you make a mistake to blame shift, to hide it, to push it down, to not acknowledge it. But when we make a mistake, when we understand, hey, Jesus already knows about this, we can rest in the fact that we can run towards Jesus and not away from him because he's got breakfast for us on the riverbank. Jesus is not waiting on the riverbank waving at us so that we go diving in after him, swim all the way over there, and then he socks us in the throat. That's not what he's waiting to do. He's waiting to make us breakfast and say, hey, you love me, right? All right, then take care of my people. Love my people with me. And there was a time when I wish I understood this in my life. I was a fresh cashier at Publix. I was working there for about 2 weeks in the cashiering role, which means I'm handling a lot of money every single day. And my manager had warned me several times, hey, be careful when you're handling cash. Be careful when you're giving change because that's when most new cashiers make their mistakes. And if you lose over $10, we're gonna have to write you up, which is a fancy retail environment word for we're going to have to tell you did something bad. And so I was about a week or two into cashiering and I lost $20. That might not sound like much, but that was over $10. So I had to be brought into the office. It was really awkward. He had to tell me that I made the mistake, even after he had warned me not to. And he did it really graciously, really kindly. But I was still walking away from the store that night going, man, I'm such a loser. If I can't cashier, what can I do? If I can't do this job, then what can I do? I'm such a failure. I don't know how I'm going to raise a family. I don't know how I'm going to get through school. If I can't cashier, then what can I do? What did I do? I went right back to my old negative thinking patterns. As opposed to taking a page out of Peter's book, which is simply own it, acknowledge it, and understand that God knew that that was going to happen. He still picked me for that job. My boss still had confidence in me, and my God still had confidence in me. He still had a plan for my life, even though I blew it and made a mistake. Had I known that, I wouldn't have gone back to my old negative thinking patterns. I wouldn't have spent 2 to 3 weeks in a negative headspace, thinking all of these negative things, I would have been able to run towards Jesus as opposed to run away from him. So here's what we're going to do. In small groups today, we are going to talk about how to run towards Jesus and not away from him. And for all of us, that might look a little bit different, which is why I love the fact that we do have small groups for you in person and online. So if you haven't yet downloaded the Zoom app, go ahead right now, download the Zoom app and send us a DM on whatever platform you are watching on. We will send you those codes so that you can be a part of small group. Because y'all, today we have stuff to talk about. We've all messed up, and we all get to walk towards Jesus and not away from him, because he already understands our mistakes. So that's where we're going to be today, Movement. That is week 2 of our series called Popular. I'll see you in small group.